All issues discussed on the following podcast are specifically relevant to Memphis and unincorporated Shelby County, including Arlington, Germantown, Lakeland, and Millington. Other jurisdictions, including Bartlett and Collierville, may have policies and procedures which differ from those discussed here. Check with your local building department to determine their requirements. Now, please join us for the Building Beat.
Welcome to the Building Beat. My name is Breana Miller, and I'm your host for this episode. Today, I'll be talking to Steve Shular, Special Assistant to the Mayor for the City of Memphis, about his role in relation to the 311 Department and his work in support of city neighborhoods. Thank you for joining me, Steve.
Well, you're quite welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I came to Memphis in 1981. I took a job at Channel 5 as a reporter, worked there for 5 years, and was doing a lot of problem-solving stories. In fact, I started a segment there called What's Bugging You? And people would write in their concerns. And so I was doing that day in and day out until one day I got a call from Mayor Hackett, who was our mayor back in the late 80s and early 90s. And he said, you've been doing so many stories about city government. Why don't you just come on over and be part of the administration? So I began working then with Mayor Richard Hackett and served with him for 7 years. And then there was a change in the administration. Went over to Methodist Health Systems and worked over there taking problems and complaints for a number of years, and worked also in the mental health arena as their marketing specialist for 5 years. And then in the middle of one day there at Methodist, I got a call from then Sheriff Luttrell's transition team, wanted me to go back into public service work, gave me that question, and I said, well, I think that'd be a good idea too. So I went back into public service work, served 8 years as the sheriff's public affairs officer. And then Sheriff Luttrell moved over to the county mayor's office and became Shelby County mayor. And I resumed my duties with him there as the county government public affairs officer. And then back in 2018, Mayor Strickland's administration and I were talking, and they said, what are you going to do when you retire from the county? And I said, I don't know. I need to pay my light bill. And so they said, well, you won't have any trouble paying the light bill because we've got complaints and we know you've had that experience. So I was so graciously able to accept due to Mayor Strickland's staff and Lisa Jeter and others on the staff that I had worked with in the past. And so I came over in April of 2018. And so I'm celebrating an anniversary this month. I can't believe it's been this many years. So
6 years.
And so my job day in and day out, if you were to follow me around, is to listen to a lot of upset people, people who have called 311. Keep in mind now, 311 gets hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls a day, and they are the referral point. They are not the investigators of complaints. They make sure the proper complaint regarding a city service is sent to the proper division. But sometimes on that other end, depending on what division of the government you're speaking about or concerning what your complaint is about, that's where the problem comes in. And sometimes the complaint is just simply not been acted on. Sometimes we may have the property owner in litigation in court. Whatever it may be, I'm to try to solve, number one, the problem. Number two, to give some sort of reason why it's taking so long. And then the other part of my job is to be the liaison for the mayor with neighborhood associations across the city. So if you have a neighborhood group and have certain questions or concerns about types of things happening in the neighborhood, certain trends that may be going on, whether it might be crime or the roads may be in bad shape, may have a lot of vacant houses in the neighborhood, people are not mowing, a lot of roadside litter, whatever it might be, then I intercept those complaints as well and try to get them solved. So I'm running from sunup to sundown.
You're really a problem solver in many ways.
Well, government, there needs to be problem solvers in government. Government is at the very root of our existence. And government is supposed to be serving all of the people. And when there's a problem, you need to be able to call and talk to somebody. In this day and age of technology, everybody wants you to go to the website and file a complaint. And sometimes you'll get a message that says, you can chat, but it's still not a live human being. And so I was so glad to know that Mayor Strickland realized that you need a live human being person. You need a live person to take those questions and concerns. And then I do a lot of house calls as well. I visit about 15 to 20 places a week, Monday through Friday, looking at problem areas where we've had before that need some attention, such as homeless camps that get set up across town, some problem properties that consistently fall right back into the same loop that they were in before, or any new problems as well. So I have to feel like looking at problems, particularly with people when you're out there in the neighborhoods with them, is much more effective than pushing people to a website.
Absolutely. This is a very interesting retirement for you because it sounds like a job.
Yeah, well, it is a retirement. I mean, well, it is a job. It wasn't necessarily a retirement job because I was coming at the end of my time at county government because Mayor Luttrell at the time was term limited. He was finished, and I was going to be finished as well. Mayor Harris went in with a whole new group of folks, which always happens most of the time when you have a new administration. So I was fortunate to have this opportunity to come over and to help Mayor Strickland at the time, and now to be able to help Mayor Young.
Wonderful. So a lot of Memphis residents know what 311 is, but let's say you were to describe to someone who maybe wasn't as familiar with what the 311 department is and does. How would you describe it?
Well, a lot of cities across America have gone to a 311 system. It's a very, very easy way of reporting governmental problems. It's not 911. That has to do with emergencies and police and fire. It's not 411 because that deals with phone numbers and things of that nature. It's not 211, which we also have here in Memphis and Shelby County, which is a service set aside to help people answer any needs they might have about social services, food stamps, counseling, utility assistance, whatever it may be. 311 is specifically set aside for governmental problems, everything from non-emergent police matters to potholes. And so there's a group of folks that work under the direction of Carolyn Malone, who's been in that role now for many, many years. Carolyn does an outstanding job. And I have to talk with Carolyn many times during the day, and also with some of her call takers as well, about some of those issues that have been reported and not yet gotten resolved. So I don't supervise 311, but I work jointly with them day by day. And so 311 is basically a clearinghouse for any kind of any kind of governmental problem that has to do with the city of Memphis. So public works, engineering, housing and community development, planning and development, ground services where you're dealing with vacant lots or vacant houses, roadside litter. We use our Public Service Corps for that. Of course, everybody knows that Public Works handles all of the street maintenance. We're also a liaison with light, gas, and water concerns, so 311 assists there as well, and I get into the middle of a lot of those about streetlights being out, and as you know, we've got a big conversion going across town now of LED streetlights, and MLGW has done a tremendous job getting those streetlights switched out in most of the neighborhoods now across our city. There's still some work yet to do, but the lights are more effective. They make it easier for traffic. They light up the area in neighborhoods to essentially make it more safe regarding crime because you've got a broader light that's on now, and it's a lot cheaper to operate them. You rarely have to change the bulbs very often as you did with the old mercury vapor lights. Right. And so the old mercury vapor lights or the orange lights kind of had that orange glow, and the new lights have that kind of warm whitish look and tend to shine downward more than across or upward like the others. But anyway, to answer your question, any kind of problem that's associated with city government, the call takers get the name, address, phone number, and ensure that information is sent over to the proper division. And then 311 also allows the public to enter those complaints sitting at their desk at home or on their phone. So it makes it a lot easier to report now than it ever was.
I have actually used the website, and I've always been pretty impressed with how intuitive it is in order to get your address, find your concern, give a description. If you want to log in, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. So I've always had a very pleasant experience using that website.
Yeah, it does a lot of the work for you. In fact, if you don't really even know a particular address, you can put in a street intersection, and then there's a map that will pop up, and then you can put your cursor over what you believe might be the house in question, and it will automatically populate that for you. And then that's very, very important that it does the work for you, because it goes to the proper department with the exact information that's needed. And then that gives us a good track to know where across the city our problems are. So we can hit a button and say, show me everything in the 38109 area, say in Westwood, or 38106 in South Memphis, or 38107 or 08 in North Memphis, wherever it might be. Because sometimes people don't know the zip code where they're going with the complaint, but the system knows, and it makes it a lot easier that way.
Another great means of data collection.
But in so doing, data collection and computer technology, again, what I think sets city government in a different category than maybe others is the fact that we do have live persons that can help you. And like I said before, I can come out and make a house call and take a look at something with you, and then get that information over to the neighborhood leader in that area and make sure it's on an agenda to be followed for the neighborhood association. So the personal touch in government is very difficult to keep up with these days, but we try our best to make sure people feel welcome and that they have a way of getting some results with a human being on the other side, hopefully.
Very briefly, I worked for the library maybe like 3 years ago, and during COVID and everything, I worked in 211. I kind of got like a glimpse into what it's like to be right there with people in like very specific moments where they need something in a way that we also do in the library, but over the phone, all the kind of concerns, questions people have, and it becomes a lot more clear, these different perspectives outside of yourself that people are dealing with. So,
well, one of the big challenges in government, probably the biggest challenge, I think, is having the same sense of urgency to solve a complaint as the person who's calling in or reporting it. And it's difficult because strictly just the volume of calls that come in each day about a particular issue. But if we can provide some individual help and service, and there's a connection on the other end, maybe a house call needs to be made, at least some topic needs to be on an agenda meeting that's followed and tracked monthly through a neighborhood group, then that gives people a different perspective of government than just trying to report an incident through an operator that you never can talk to, or going into a website and you wonder if anybody's even going to answer.
So maybe you've encountered this kind of confusion that we have in planning and development, is the term or the name of the department, code enforcement, kind of gets thrown around a lot to describe a lot of different duties and responsibilities that people have or have associated with that name. Have you encountered any confusion?
Yeah, the word code enforcement is a general term that basically is on the other end of a big category of, quote, neighborhood problems. And so we have 2 or 3 different code enforcement departments really operating in our community. One is the city and one is the county. And the city of Memphis code enforcement deals with problems such as vacant houses that are standing wide open, or grass has not been cut at a vacant house or an occupied house. There may be illegal dumping going on. So that's an issue for environmental enforcement. And all that falls under the purview of Memphis code enforcement, and it's part of another big umbrella called neighborhood improvement. But just for general terms, across the nation, people know it as kind of code enforcement if there's a problem in a neighborhood. So you've got the city that handles vacant lots, occupied properties, the structures that are in the city of Memphis, both residences and buildings. And then you've got another code enforcement branch of the government that serves both the city and the county, which is through the Planning and Development Division. And technically, they're more of what we call the zoning enforcement inspectors, because people will sometimes have a piece of property and not use it for its intended purpose, such as I live in a home in a neighborhood, but I have mechanic skills. I like working on cars. And I get the idea one day that I'm just going to open up a repair shop at my home, so people can just bring their cars over for oil changes, or sometimes I'll let them just pull the car in the front yard and I'll open the hood and we'll take the motor out. And of course, that takes a long while to get that done. And so suddenly my home becomes a car lot full of junked vehicles that are sometimes parked in the yard and on the street and all of that. That would be a case for the zoning inspectors, not necessarily Memphis Code, but zoning inspectors, which again serves both the city and the unincorporated areas of the county. And so those inspectors would go out and cite me as the property owner and say, hey, you can't do that. You cannot use your residence as a business. So we frequently have a lot of calls throughout the city that come in to Memphis 311 about these shade tree mechanics. And so the zoning officials then will go out and issue those violation orders. Just over the weekend, we had complaints come in over a man that decided he was going to just start selling tacos from his home out in the Getwell area near the University of Memphis. And so that then means coordination with yet another department, which would be the health department, because we certainly don't want people serving food that may or may not be under the perfect conditions of being sold or consumed. So the zoning enforcement inspectors would then work jointly with the health inspectors. And then sometimes the housing inspectors will be called in because there may be just junk cars that the man has bought to say, well, I may need some parts off of that car. I'll just park it in the backyard. And suddenly you've got 3 different agencies showing up at one piece of property that all have different jurisdictions on what they can enforce. And then again, if I'm the property owner and I receive these violation orders and I don't respond to them, the inspectors will usually come back one more time and say, hey, we've been out here and we've explained to you what's legal and what's not, and you've ignored us. Now, if we come back, you're going to court, and we're going to Memphis and Shelby County Environmental Court. There's going to be a mandatory court cost for you just to show up down there. And there may be then, depending on the way the judge rules, a fine. And it could be $50 per day per violation, should the judge so want to order that. And in some situations, there could be a 10-day jail time if someone doesn't respond. And then depending on the amount of debris or problems or the amount of the violation, say if you've got someone that's illegally dumping on a piece of property, I'm the property owner, and there's all kinds of illegal dumping on it, or I've been caught dumping. Depending on how much all that weighs, it could go from a misdemeanor in the environmental court, which is basically a civil violation, to a criminal violation, and that's a low-class felony that then the health department and code and police would all work on with the help of the district attorney. Many years ago, one of the first cases I remember coming over to the city, we had felony dumping going on, and we had the amount of debris was just unbelievable that people were dumping, and the property owner wasn't responding to it. And so then we realized that there was sometimes there's a connection between the property owner and the people even dumping it on there. They just give somebody, yeah, you can come over and dump for a certain fee, and then suddenly a vacant piece of property becomes an absolute landfill overnight. So it's very difficult work sometimes, but the inspectors do a really good job trying to figure out who's doing what. Number one, who owns the property and who's responsible. And that leads another discussion that's very, very difficult sometimes, and that is, say I own a piece of property. I live in Nebraska, but I own a vacant lot in Memphis, so I'm never there. And somehow, lo and behold, overnight, somebody dumps all kinds of stuff on my property. And because I'm not there, I don't know about it. Well, I get a code violation in the mail that says your property is in disrepair and you're responsible. Well, the first thing as a property owner I want to do is say, well, I didn't put all that stuff on there.
Right.
But the bottom line is, regardless of who put it there, I'm still responsible. So we have to work through some of these problems with property owners and then work with them on some ways to try to figure out who is doing the dumping. So we work with them on placement of cameras, perhaps. And of course, the technology is getting better and better as we go along, and cheaper to put cameras up that can trigger a image on your phone and almost immediately if somebody's on your property. So there's a tremendous amount of not only enforcement work, but a lot of resource work, helping people understand, okay, how can we help you try to figure this out so that we don't keep bugging you? And so if you have images of someone dumping on your property at 11 o'clock at night, and there happens to be a vehicle involved and maybe the license plate, if it's even visible, if it's well lit, sometimes that happens at night even, then we try to link that property owner up with the police or other investigators that can help us out. Now, Memphis Code has an entire squad designated for illegal dumping. They call it environmental enforcement. And so they pinpoint places around our city, and we've got several that are down in the 109 area. There's several places where people will just go into these two-lane roads that seemingly are just kind of sailing through woods and dump stuff on the side of the road. We've got some of that up in the Raleigh area as well, in the 128 area. But we've got a lot of sections of 38109 in some of those areas down there where people will just ride along and shove stuff off on the side of the road and keep going because they don't want to take it to the dump because there is a dump fee associated with that. The landfill weighs how much you're bringing in, and there's a fee for all that to dump it. And so a lot of contractors and others will just say, I'm not going to get in line at the landfill. I'm just going to find a vacant lot and shove it off the road, shove it off on the side of the road. And in a lot of those areas around the city, we've got hidden cameras. We've got deer cameras up that are in trees and can trigger images. So just when you think it's safe to dump, better think again, because the environmental enforcement folks have a ton of folks on the court docket on any given week that have to answer for, now, why was your vehicle here at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night? And looks like a couple of you, maybe even you, as you stand before me here in the court, you look very familiar. Looks almost like you're in this video. And so we've got a lot of those initiatives underway across the city where we have hidden cameras. And then sometimes if we're having a tremendous amount and have not placed hidden cameras yet, then we call on the police to help us with some blue light trailers that will kind of tip people off that you're coming into an area where you're being watched. And so we have to work really hard at that, making sure that we do as much enforcement as we can, not only for the poor property owner that lives in Nebraska that's not there, that people are dumping on his property, but the people that drive day in and day out on that road, because nothing breaks your spirit more than crime and blight.
Oh, so true.
When people are afraid, that's at the absolute base of everything, whether they want to live here or work here. And so we've got to do a better job with crime, and right hand in hand with it is the way something looks. Because if you're driving around the city, and we have a lot of challenges right now with people dumping tires, there's tires everywhere across the city. We need to be doing a much better job picking those up, picking up roadside litter. We've got the Public Service Corps, which is a whole team of former inmates that we've hired to help them know that life is better when you have a permanent job that has benefits and you can make your living and budget your money as opposed to just not doing those kinds of things. And so that group has been very successful. That was one of Mayor Strickland's initiatives when he started. And that group is still working every day. It's about 25 people working across the city. We move them around from zip code to zip code based on where they find the roadside litter. Now, to clarify, they don't go on private property. Say I'm the vacant lot owner. I can't have city employees picking up trash on my property unless we have a dedicated cleanup on the weekend. And sometimes City Beautiful folks can help out if they're going through a neighborhood and picking up roadside litter. They'll go ahead and pick up some things if there's not a lot of litter on that property. I've done that before. I've participated in I don't know how many cleanups through the years on Saturdays. And we just go down the street and pick up anything we see. And if it's up in the vacant lot, we'll go up there and grab the tire and move it down here to the curb and let's get rid of it. So, but we do have resources and we're trying our best to make sure that those are being utilized.
Nice. Well, I'm so glad so much is going into these two things you mentioned that make people feel a certain way about where they live.
Yeah, but it's still such a challenge. I know there's probably someone listening right now and said, "Hey, Bub, have you driven the interstates recently? have you come into our city in the north, south, east, and west gateways?" And I just wanted to speak up about this. We have a very, very dedicated group now working at Tennessee Department of Transportation. We've got a great fellow that's out there now, Cody Joyner, who is new on the staff, is one of the chief engineers for the Tennessee Department of Transportation. We've met with him, and he is bringing a lot of experience into that job. And so we're working with the state right now to pinpoint, especially our gateways coming into the city, and ensuring that we get the grass cut and the trash picked up and the tires removed with the amount of money that the state has. Mm-hmm. And so we've also got other initiatives underway to try to have some businesses in our area underwrite some of the trash pickup and the grass cutting, so that instead of it being done once every couple of months, well, why not once a month? Because you and I mow our yard more than once a month, I bet.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes it a tremendous challenge for the mayor or the governor or whoever it might be to ask a business owner to move his place of business either to Tennessee or Memphis, and the place looks horrible from the time you first get off the airplane. Mm-hmm. In fact, Plow Boulevard's a good example of that. We've got a new initiative right now trying to clean up Plow Boulevard to make sure that the potholes are fixed and when it can be repaved, fixing guardrail, removing tires and trash. Because if you're coming into this city on an airplane and you take an Uber from the airport to a corporate office somewhere, and the first thing you see going down Plow Boulevard or Interstate 240 and Airways is garbage and trash, why in the world would I want to bring my business to a place like this?
Right.
So this is kindly hard grunt level work that we've got to reimagine ourselves being in the middle of. And just because it's someone else's jurisdiction doesn't mean the mayor's office doesn't have a role to make sure that gets done. So that's why we wanted to go ahead and meet with Mr. Joyner, who was a very gracious fellow and very, very responsive. His whole staff over there does a great job. And so we're hoping that citizens will start seeing some change in the what we call the front yard of our city, which is the interstates. Mm-hmm. And it's absurd to ask people to come here as tourists or to move their business here, and you've just got junk and garbage everywhere you look at. Right. Nobody's going to do that. So we have to recommit ourselves every day. And I do that coming in every morning, though. There'll be specific areas of the city that I will purposely drive to see, well, did we get the trash? Did we get the garbage? And, of course, there's challenges with the amount of money that we've got available through the state for interstate maintenance and roadway maintenance and the need. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean we're just going to sit back and idly let it go. So that's why we're looking again at this idea of having businesses underwrite some of those interchanges near their place of business. Many, many years ago when I was with Mayor Hackett's office, the mayor had done a great job getting businesses around the city to be involved in the beautification of the interchanges near their corporations. So wouldn't it be great one day we could have FedEx adopt Airways and 240? Mm-hmm. Maybe St. Jude could help us with Danny Thomas and I-40. Right as you come across the bridge, first thing you see maybe would be a manicured lawn and some pretty flowers in the medians, as opposed to garbage and trash and tires, which is what they see sometimes right now, despite how hard the Tennessee Department of Transportation is picking it up. There may be other businesses out. There may be a business out east that could help us with the first thing you see when you come in from Lakeland, after you come out of Arlington and Lakeland and hit that Bartlett city limits around exit 18. Wouldn't it be nice to see flowers in the median and no trash and no tires? Nice. And with the existing resources the state has, that's trouble right now in getting routine pickups and cleanups. But is that going to stop us from our ability to plan and go out and ask people to help us? No. And the City Beautiful is behind a lot of this too. Eldra White does a great job at City Beautiful. She's been executive director out there for a number of years and works daily with many of the corporations around the city trying to get into that that mode of thinking to get them to help us. And then they also do a lot of neighborhood cleanups that I spoke of before, where we go out with neighborhood groups, maybe 10, 15 of us will meet on a Saturday morning, and we'll have all the bags and gloves and rakes and everything needed for cleanup, and we'll just go out and work 3 hours and bag it up. So we have to always kind of be looking for inventive ways to get people involved. And then just to have people play a role in the beautification of their neighborhood. Lady Bird Johnson, many years ago, the wife of President Lyndon B. Johnson, she started the first national beautification program, which eventually led to the Environmental Protection Agency, of all things, during President Nixon's administration. So we know that it's important not only to look after our land, but to protect our land. You know,
Right.
the Environmental Protection Agency obviously is to get rid of the chemicals and dumping and things that have happened to our land. But what about just looking at it and taking care of it? And that would be just a great dream if we could have every person in our community adopt the curb in front of their home or their property, whether it's vacant, business, or residence. Think how everything would look if everybody just swept up or cleaned up right in front of their home. We do have adopt-a-block programs and adopt-a-highway stretch programs that the state has and the federal government has, but we're not asking them to do anything but just clean up out in front of their home.
Right.
So I do that. I live out in the eastern part of the city. I live out in the Bartlett area, and I adopted many years ago a 1.5 mile stretch near my home.
Yep.
And I walk every day just for physical fitness. I do my 10,000 steps daily, but 3 times a week, I will go down Kirby Whitten Road, and I'll start there at Andrews Road and go all the way down to Stage. And I'll just take a Walmart bag with me, and I'll just pick up the Coke cans and other things that come from the fast food joints nearby. I'm going to be walking over them, so why not just reach down and pick them up? So, and that's very important, because we can't, as city employees working in this arena, go out and challenge neighborhood people to clean up if we ourselves don't. So,
Absolutely.
But it makes me feel better knowing that I'm doing something to help our community. I'm not calling the city to say, when are you going to send a crew out to pick up all this litter? Just get a bag and pick it up and get some exercise at the same time. So if we had more people helping us with that, and we do have a lot of dedicated neighborhood leaders around the city that are doing that. Folks in Westwood could write a book on how to clean up a community. They do. Miss Oler Hughes has been a mainstay in that community for so many years. She's done so much work. I can think of others out in the Sea Isle area, Fox Meadows area, the Parkway Village area, all kinds of neighborhood associations in southeast Shelby County. I think of Linda Whalen down in the neighborhood that she's been in the Burlington area, in the 38125 zip code. They're always cleaning up. But if we just had more and more people helping us, we could really make the city look a lot different. So as Lady Bird Johnson said years ago in a speech, I remember she said, your town needs your help. And we've just got to be able to own our own problems and say, well, we can't do much about crime except report it and know our police officers and support them at community meetings and know what they're about. But we can all take time to reach down and pick up a drink can that's on the curb or other things. And so that's our simple message each day. Just help us. Just, the problems in your neighborhood. Bend down and pick up that Coke can. And if there's crime, then get involved and let us hear from you so we can track it down. The most important thing that we could leave folks with was this thought that if you see crime, report it. Make sure you're part of a neighborhood watch program where you get to know your neighbors. Right now, we just don't have a lot of folks that know who lives next door or across the street.
Oh.
It's important that people take responsibility to keep their community safe. And again, as we've talked about earlier in the program, keep it beautiful. Pick up in front of your curb and then let us know if there's big problems. But we need people's help to let us know where those places are so they can be investigated.
Well, thank you for joining me on this episode, Steve. I hope our listeners learned quite a lot. I think you've shared a wealth of knowledge here from your experience and from what you do now about 311, about working with neighborhood associations, about keeping our city beautiful. And it's really comforting to know how much the mayor's administration cares about some of the same things that we care about, as well as the public servants who work in 311, how much they care about connecting with residents of our city, especially over the concerns that they have. So thank you for joining me on this.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you. And for our listeners, if you have any questions or want to make a report to 311, you can dial 311 or 901-636-6500, or you can go online to 311.memphistn.gov. And thank you for joining us for this episode of The Building Beat. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Building Beat. Executive producers are Director John Zena and Deputy Director Nadia Logan Robinson. Associate producer is me, Breana Miller. Special thanks to Ina Esco, artist in residence with the Memphis Library Foundation and the Memphis Public Libraries. The song featured in the show is Hush by the Mason Fair. This is a production of the Memphis and Shelby County Division of Planning and Development. To learn more about this podcast and our work, visit our website at develop901.com.